"Fog," said Uncle Jim. "Don't be talking about fog." We were stopped, having a lunch, sitting up on a log. We were out in the woods for a few sticks to burn, and visibility was dropping, but there was no big concern. He said, "Where I'm from in Dunce Cove, the fog gets that thick. There's no good in going woodin', my son, you wouldn't get a stick. You can cut all you want, but the trees won't come down. They get hung up in the fog and can't reach the ground. But it's good for the fishermen, though you'd think that it ain't. They paint lines on the fog using fluorescent paint. One big line from the harbour out into the Sound and a whole lot of small ones out to every man's ground." "Where's Dunce Cove?" says I. "Never heard of the place." Uncle Jim closed his eyes like he was about to say grace. "In Placentia Bay, I suppose, round Barhaven, perhaps. It's never cleared up long enough to get marked on the maps. I left there one day around 40 years ago, and it cleared up one evening for an hour or so. A chopper pitched down from that funny blue sky. Buddy happened to spot Dunce Cove, or he would have fled by." "Where's this to?" says he. "Dunce Cove," says I. "Where's Dunce Cove?" says he. "Sure you're standing in it, boy." And then he asked if I'd go with him on into town to prove that Dunce Cove had really been found. "I suppose so," I said, for it seemed a good lark, and I figured for sure I'd be back home by dark. "And that's the last time I saw it," he said, draining his cup, though he'd searched a few years before he gave up. "Come on, Uncle Jim," I said, "it can't be that thick." Our lunch break was over, and he was limbing out a stick. "And that's what you know," he said, not missing a beat. "In Dunce Cove, my son, it's thick enough to eat. Some like it toasted, with molasses or jam, or you can salt it in bulk for the crowd in Japan. Mother used to dice it with pork fat and onions, or mix it with mustard as a poultice for bunions. And it can be a hazard if you don't watch out. I've seen youngsters trip on it and skin their knees out. And one fellow I know who's a bit of a souse was up shingling a roof on a 5-story house. He lost track of his place being well into the grog and was 5 feet past the eave, nailing shingles to fog. The next thing you knew, sir, down he came rousel. I remember I said 'twas a 5-story house, so you might think he got killed. He never got a scratch. He hauled out his smokes, he lit up a match, finished his cigarette before he hit ground. He would have hit hard, but the fog slowed him down. "Go on with your lies," I said. "'Twas never that thick. You're always up to some kind of old prank or a trick. Now, as to our day, it was certainly getting thicker, and visibility was dropping now quicker and quicker. We were down on the Burren, somewhere east of the highway, and would have stopped for the night if I'd have had my way. We could get lost in this," I called to Jim up ahead, but he kept right on going. "This is nothing," he said. And then he told me a tale I'll call taller than most of when d'Iberville the pirate was raiding the coast. He held all the bay from Placentia where he sat, but he couldn't find Dunce Cove, so he didn't hold that. They were all for old England in the cove when they heard that the Frenchman was coming, and then they knew that there'd be trouble that evening. Things didn't look well. The fog was all lifted, and it was clear as a bell. Well, all hands got together to come up with a plan to deal with the Frenchman as he drew near to hand, for he was armed to the teeth with both cannon and ball, and he meant to take Dunce Cove for once and for all. When they sized up their arsenal, sir, things looked pretty poor. Some rusty old muskets from the 30 Years' War. It was figured pretty generally that they didn't stand a chance, but must learn how to parley and swear oaths to France. Then up spoke one old fellow named Azariah Dean, saying, "Enough of that foolishness, boys. I got a scheme to see off that Frenchman from out of our cove. Hark what I'm saying now if you wants to get sove. Old Azariah had a cannon, you see, from one of Gilbert's ships from 1583. He'd bought it for a bottle of rum and 6pence, and used it for ballast in his wharf ever since." "That's all very well," said young Joseph Dench. He was practicing how to say welcome in French. "A cannon alone will not do us much good. What are you going to fire out of it? Balls made of wood?" "Something harder than that," Azariah said, leading the curious crowd to his shed, there to behold in a bark pot of brine a way to defeat a French ship of the line. "Now hold up there, Jim," I said, stopping his tail. We were deep in the woods with lights starting to fail. "I'd say we're lost, and we better stop here and build a bow whiffin', and you better stay near. I can just barely see you there 10 feet away. The fog is as thick as I've seen in my day." So we built our rough shelter and made on a fire. It had been a long day, and we were starting to tire. Ate a bottle of moose and a bit of hard bread, rolled up a smoke, and got ready for bed. Well, our shelter was snug, and the night was not cold, so Jim picked up his story right after he told me we weren't really lost, though it seemed it for sure. He said, "This place is familiar. I've been here before." So all hands was gathered, as he'd already said, around Azariah's bark pot at the back of his shed, And what do you suppose that they saw lying there? A 12-pounder cannonball, right rounded and fair. Azariah had figured that the Frenchman would come, and he'd known right away what had to be done. So on a real thick day he carved the ball out of fog and put it in pickle for a proper long sog. Well, all hands turned to and mounted the gun on Thomas Brown's hooker, lying out in the run. Then they hoisted all canvas and sailed out in the bight, just as d'Iberville's big frigate hove into sight. The hooker was shabby and a bit of a wreck, so the Frenchman sailed near and bawled down from his deck, "Away, Dunch Cove, in the name of Le Roi!" The answer came point blank from the old cannon's maw. A hole opened up on the French water line, and she started to settle, with all hands a-flying over the sides into shallops and punts, and d'Iberville savage at this worst of affronts. It wasn't a long spell till the frigate went down, and the hooker became biggest ship on the Sound. In Dunch Cove that night they had quite the spree, with music and dancing and the grog running free. And do you know that that ball that went through that French ship carried on across the water with a hop and a skip, sank another French vessel that got in its way off Mirasheen Island halfway across the bay? "I don't know what's worse," I said, after a spell. "Your navigation skills or the lies that you tell." "Cross my heart," he said, "not a word of a lie." But then we both fell sound to the world by and by. Next morning the fog was as thick as before, but Jim said, "Don't worry, boy, I know the score. We wandered a couple more days in that place. You could just see your hands stretched out from your face. And then suddenly one morning we walked into a town, and when I caught sight of Jim, he was kissing the ground. And then we were spotted. 'Here's Jimmy back,' went the call, and then the tears of joy flowed. Oh, it was some snotting ball. Now let me see, that was 3 years ago, and Dunch Cove's not such a bad place, you know. I married Jim's daughter last year in the fall. I wonder what she looks like, a tall?"